The Spotlight, shining a light on podcasts and videos that have caught our attention.
Hi and welcome to The Spotlight. I'm Jen Spiker and today I'm highlighting a podcast series recently added to the Vision app. Encounters with Jesus is a Bible teaching series produced by Good News Unlimited. Dr. Gonzalez and Malcolm Pollard take listeners through all the key events, miracles and teachings of Christ's life in an engaging and relatable way. In this episode, Dr. Ellie looks at the time Jesus ignored a Canaanite woman.
The Spotlight with Jen Spiker.
Ellie, there's some people that think God is a harsh God.
Oh, there are lots of people like that.
And there's an encounter with Jesus where, if you look at it at face value, certainly appeared that way in this case as well.
Yeah, this is a really interesting encounter because Jesus doesn't respond the way you'd expect him to. He doesn't say the things you'd expect Jesus to say. It's very un-Jesus-like, this encounter, right? I think it's best if I actually read it to you from the Bible and then we'll go through it. Then Jesus left Galilee and went north to the region of Tyre and Sidon. A Gentile woman who lived there came to him pleading, "Have mercy on me, O Lord, Son of David, for my daughter is possessed by a demon that torments her severely." But Jesus gave her no reply, not even a word. Then his disciples urged him to send her away. "Tell her to go away," they said. "She's bothering us with all her begging." Then Jesus said to the woman, "I was sent only to help God's lost sheep, the people of Israel." But she came and worshipped him, pleading again, "Lord, help me." Jesus responded, "It isn't right to take food from the children and throw it to the dogs." She replied, "That's true, Lord. But even dogs are allowed to eat the scraps that fall beneath their masters' tables." "Dear woman," Jesus said to her, "your faith is great. Your request is granted." And her daughter was instantly healed. Now that's a really weird story, don't you think so?
It is a bit odd.
You think Jesus would be all, love and kindness and sweetness and sunshine and whatnot. But here's this poor woman who's come to beg Jesus for him to heal her daughter who is possessed by a demon, and at first, he ignores her completely.
Wiped her, it appears.
Yeah, just keeps walking, doesn't look at her. And the disciples tell Jesus to tell her to go away because she's being really annoying with all her begging and calling out. Then Jesus says to the woman, "I haven't come to help you. You're not a Jew. You don't go to my church. You're part of the great unwashed. My duty is I've come to help my people. You're not one of my people." But she insists. And then Jesus says it's not right to take food from the children of Abraham, the Jews, my people, and throw it to the dogs. He's calling her a dog. Had you noticed that before?
Not until I'm reading it there, I'm going,
pretty un-Jesus-like. So I think this will take a bit of explaining, eh? And in the end, she persists. She argues with him, and he grants her request. Let's look at some background here. She's not Jewish. She lives in the region of Tyre and Sidon. So she lives in a region where the Phoenicians used to live. It's a region that were traditionally enemies of the Jews. In fact, bitter enemies. For hundreds of years, the Phoenicians had actually ruled over the Jews and basically kept them in poverty and virtually in slavery back in ancient times.
Okay.
So apart from the fact they hated anyone who wasn't Jewish, who was a Gentile, they were all unclean. Apart from that, these were their oppressors historically, and the Jews didn't forget. Just like people today in our world, they have enmities and hatreds that are generational.
Sure.
So in the ancient world, they didn't forget. Why has Jesus come here? Because Jesus is a Jew, and good Jews never went to non-Jewish regions like this, at least not if you lived in Judea and the land of Israel. Why had Jesus intentionally gone there? Well, the reason is that he's been facing increasing opposition from the religious leaders in Jerusalem who've been sending their agents to follow him around everywhere, harassing him. He knows that they're looking to pick him up and arrest him and kill him. And not long before, Jesus has heard of the arrest and death of his cousin, John the Baptist.
Yep.
So he's seeking safety in regions that are outside the boundaries of Israel, outside the reach of the authorities in Jerusalem, if you like. And that partially explains why he went to this region of Tyre and Sidon. But you know what, Malcolm? I think that he also went to this place and at this time to have this encounter with this woman. I think that this too was a divine
Another
appointment.
divine appointment.
Exactly. And so I think all of this puts the story in a little bit of context. It's true that Jesus spent most of his time talking to the Jews, but he seems to make a point to go outside the boundaries of Israel and to seek out non-Jewish people and make a point of telling them, hey, I'm here for you too. My message is for you too. I've come here to bless you and to heal and to save you too. And this is one of these examples. And Jesus, what he's trying to do here is he's actually trying to teach his disciples a really important lesson, because his disciples are good Jews. They hate Gentiles. They hate the descendants of the Phoenicians. And they don't think much of women either, if you want to throw that in.
Yep.
Right? And Jesus here wants to very dramatically teach them a lesson. And look at how he does it. So this woman comes to Jesus, and Jesus walks along the road, and she's alongside and behind him and just won't stop calling out, asking him, have mercy, O Lord, Son of David. Look, she calls him by his messianic title. The Son of David was the Messiah, was the promised Saviour. Not even most of the Jews did that.
Yeah.
How much theology did she know? Did she come from a good Jewish family? See, the church we go to, our pedigree, how many degrees we have in theology, they mean nothing in terms of our faith. In fact, did you know that the only two people who in all the Gospels Jesus commended for their faith, neither of them were Jews. They were both Gentiles who knew next to nothing. But to both of them, he says, you have great faith. And this is one of these examples. It's amazing. I love this story because it just reveals so much about Jesus and about what's fundamental and important in life. And Jesus ignores her. What do you think, Malcolm, the disciples would be thinking as Jesus ignores her?
They'd be going, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
They're cheering for Jesus. Yeah, finally, Jesus. You're doing the right thing. Don't listen to this woman. She's a Gentile. The blessings are only for people who belong to our church, right? They're cheering Jesus on. Yeah. But she won't shut up. And so eventually the disciples say to Jesus, well, do something. She's just annoying us. Tell her to go away. And they're fully expecting that Jesus is going to do that because he's been ignoring her, and they're good Jews and they know that promises and the blessings are only for them. And so Jesus, instead of telling her to go away, he says, I was sent only to help God's lost sheep, the people of Israel. And what do you think the disciples are thinking?
Yes,
that's it, Jesus. You preach it. Strike two. Yeah, you preach it.
Yeah.
Right? But she doesn't give up. In fact, she comes and she falls at Jesus' feet, worshipping him, pleading again, Lord, help me. Look at the quality of her faith. She has nothing to offer. All she can do is to fall upon Christ's mercy. That's what true faith does. Lord, help me. Jesus' response, he says to her, it isn't right to take food from the children and throw it to the dogs. And the term dogs is what Jews in the first century called the Gentiles. It's not right to take the food, the blessings that belong to God's special people and throw it to the dogs. Back then in ancient times, typically you didn't have dogs as pets in the same way that you have now. I mean, people did have dogs, but dogs served functions, like they were hunting dogs.
Sure.
Or they were guard dogs. And if they didn't serve a function, you basically couldn't afford to feed dogs. So they just ate whatever fell off your table, which was very little. I remember my dad grew up in very poor circumstances, and they had a practice in his home in the 1930s in Spain, times of starvation, that if a piece of bread fell off the table, you picked it up and you kissed it, and then you ate it. It's like the 5-second rule, right? That if food falls on the ground and you pick it up within 5 seconds, it's okay. But you basically kissed it and blessed it, because it's bread, it's food. But you didn't do that, so food was precious. So, food rarely fell off the master's table. And dogs weren't like beloved little fluffy, cuddly pets. They were like, I don't know, have you ever been to countries like in the developing nations?
Oh, yeah.
And where do we usually see dogs?
Oh, they're just running everywhere in the neighbourhood.
Yeah, in packs.
Skinny as, hunting for food.
Yeah, and, I remember the barks wake you up every morning, and the howls, it's semi-wild. It was kind of like that, right? So dogs wasn't a term of endearment. This doesn't mean puppy dog. It means a foul, filthy, disgusting, unclean dog in the Jewish mind.
Yeah.
Jesus is being really, 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 really harsh, apparently. And Malcolm, what do you think the disciples are thinking when they hear Jesus say this?
This is great.
Yeah, just grind her into the ground, Lord.
Yeah.
We're right behind you. This is exactly what we'd do if we were you, right? And she replies to Jesus, she says, it's true, but even the dogs are allowed to eat the scraps that fall beneath their master's table. She's saying to Jesus, Lord, I don't deserve your blessings. I don't deserve your mercy. You're not obligated in any way to me. Just let me have the scraps. Now, where did we ever get this idea as Christians that God is obligated to us? That somehow he's our celestial waiter, and just because we tip him a bit in the bucket at church every weekend, he's obligated to us to give us good service. God owes us nothing, and we owe God everything. And this woman understands this. You know what another word, a single word for what I've just said is? It's called faith. Just throwing yourself upon God's mercy with the open hand of faith. She can't present her money. She has none probably. She can't present her knowledge and, understanding of Christian beliefs. She doesn't have that. She doesn't have good deeds or, a good life well lived. She probably doesn't have that. All she can present is her need and trust in Jesus.
And again, that's the point where Jesus knew her.
Yeah.
And that divine appointment was chosen because he knew who she was to teach this lesson.
And because Jesus knew her, he knew that she would help him teach this lesson to the disciples and all the people who are going to be disciples of Jesus in the next 2,000 years. To you, Malcolm, to me, to everyone who hears this, we need to learn this lesson. That grace has no boundaries. Mercy has no borders. That Christ came for all. And we need to learn the lesson of what true faith is, that faith isn't grounded on wherever you choose to go to church. Yes, you're God's people, but God has his sheep in other penfolds too, in other sheepfolds. Grace isn't limited by your economic status, by your surname, by the number of alphabets after your name, not limited or defined by any other mercy than the fact that it is a free gift from the one who owes you nothing and that you receive with an empty hand. And Jesus needed to teach this to the disciples because he needed them to take the gospel to the world, not just to the Jews. And that's a work that every follower of Jesus is still engaged in. And we must set aside our prejudices about who is worthy and who is unworthy and who receives the blessing and who doesn't receive the blessing, and understand that Jesus came for all and the gospel is for all and his grace is for all. So I know that Jesus seemed tough here, but it was all an act. It's not that the woman had to convince Jesus. It's that Jesus had a very, very important lesson to teach his followers. And you know what? If Jesus has sometimes seemed tough in your life, maybe there's a really important lesson he wants to teach you as well.
On the Spotlight, we've been listening to Dr. Ellie Gonzalez tell the story from the Gospels when Jesus ignored a Canaanite woman. If you want to read it yourself, you'll find it in Matthew 15, verses 21 to 28. New episodes of Encounters with Jesus are added to the Vision app each week. Find them by tapping the podcast tab and searching for Encounters with Jesus. If you have a favourite podcast or video series that should be featured, click Contact Us at vision.org.au and share the link. My name is Jen Spiker. Join me next time as I highlight another podcast or video on the Spotlight.
For more great podcasts and videos like the one featured today, check out vision.org.au or the free Vision app.